All right, here we go, you guys. We appreciate you watching. If YouTube, whatever channel this is on, if it's away. Long story short, there's a lot going on in our fishery. It's a swordfish fishery. We're in South Florida. We're going to talk about several places in the world. I'm with Tim Pickett from Longline Pittman. Again, I'm RJ Boyle, and we're going to try and make some sense and discuss some of the swordfish regulation that has recently passed. We're going to talk about the future of the fishery. We're going to talk about quotas and certain things that are sometimes hard to understand. The piece of the pie of the United States, ICAT. There's a lot of terms and words that a lot of times can confuse a lot of people. At the same time, there's things that people think that are bigger than they really are. So all we're going to do, we're going to sit back, we're going to talk like two rational gentlemen.
Yes.
At a ball game. The only thing not missing will be a couple of dirty dogs. But we're going to sit and we're going to talk. And then after this is all over, feel free to reach out to either one of us. You can email us both. I'm RJ Boyle Studio, rjboylestudio@gmail.com. You're
Tim at lindgren-pittman.com. It's written on the side of your electric reel.
There you go. So we're gonna go into a lot of different directions, but understand that at the end of it, if you still have questions, feel free to reach out to us. So we're going to get right into it. All right, guys, first thing to understand with this fishery, and you can step on me anytime, I'm ready.
Okay.
Just so we want to get our point across. We're going to talk about a quota. And anytime you're dealing with a swordfish, you're dealing with a worldwide harvested fish. It's a very, it's a tough fish to deal with worldwide. A lot of people are catching them all over the place. So there's a pie. We call it the quota, and you're going to see it here in a second. And Tim's going to explain it to you. But basically, this isn't about our little spot on the map. This is a worldwide fish. So understand our little space in it, our piece in it. We can't always just look at it that way because it's not about that. There's a much bigger picture that we have to be concerned with. So that's the reason for being up in arms a little bit when you see me make a post like I did. There's a lot more to it than you're seeing. There's years of, we went to Washington and we're sitting on panels and we're trying to protect our fishery and we're trying to educate people in Washington. Skip Smith, Ron Connington, Vince Montella, all these people that had involvement in trying to somewhat manage our fishery or at least give enough quality information to people that don't fish to make decisions. So understand. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and it is, you know, I mean, I sit on the advisory panel, which people like this have sat on before me. It's kind of the ICAT light. It's the U.S. highly migratory species advisory panel. And you know, a lot of this, and I'm glad we had the chance to do this, is educating people that, you know, I mean, you guys watching this are probably fishing people. You have an infinite more knowledge even still if you don't understand the way the quota system works and how the commercial fishery may work in general, but then somebody that lives in Nebraska or somebody that lives in other places, it's realistically their fishery too. You know, so you think about it in terms of the whole U.S. and explaining to people in other places, you know, this is a resource that exists to the United States. So how we're going to manage that resource after we're dealt it is kind of what this conversation's about. You know, but just understanding, you know, the piece of the pie in our backyard is one thing. Our backyard is really a small area in this pie.
That's right.
You know, and these fish, you hear all the time, someone makes a sense, well, fish have tails. Well, these ones have tails too, you know, and really our backyard, it's an accessible piece of the pie, which makes it such an interesting conversation in the first place because it's close. And a lot of people can get there. But it's a small area in terms of, you know, a much broader and a lot of fish, you know, overall.
Absolutely.
I guess is what I'm trying, you know.
You're right, you're right. And here's another thing, guys, as we get into this and as you start looking at a quota and you're listening to Tim talk about it, a couple things to think about and just remember. This is about working to figure out and solve a problem. This is about discussing what problems we have, and it's also, we need to figure out how to come up with solutions, not just beat a dead horse and beat each other up. When I posted the results of this opening, there's always those couple guys that got to just egg it on, and there's a few in every crowd. That's the way it is, and people are going to say things about me, and that's fine. And there's good stuff and there's bad stuff. That's the nature of people. That's fine. It's all good. The picture is much bigger than that. This really isn't about us. This isn't about Rex and commercial. This is not about any of that. It really isn't. At the end of the day, when we're done talking about this, you can understand the picture's much bigger. So just listen. And as far as educating yourself, if you can come away learning one thing here, then it was beneficial for you to listen. And that's the bottom line. Whether you're fishing or you're listening to us talk about fishing, I started 20 years old. I can tell you 20-something years ago, back when we started the Swordfish Club, we didn't know anything about swordfish. Nobody was catching any. We knew. I mean, the longliners were the first ones out here catching swordfish. So
think about your swordfish club back then. This is before my time.
That's right.
Before I've been here for 10 years, but before my time, who was the people that were at the club?
Vinny Montella. You had Allie, and you had guys who was willing to give information.
Yeah.
So understand, we're not pinning anything against a longliner. It doesn't matter. I don't care if you're a deep dropper. I don't care if you sell fish, don't sell fish. None of that's right. We're talking about a Noaa situation. We have this situation, and it's really a Noaa-based discussion. It's a worldwide swordfish-based discussion. And so from that perspective, let's get into this. And it's a discussion on where we've been, where we are now, and where we want to go. Correct.
A lot of things have happened that are, in my opinion, and in other people's opinion, might be wrong things, but are right things. And we have a lot of time now where we've learned a lot more about the fishery. We learned, however many years ago you couldn't, where did they go during the day? And we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot conservation-wise. We've learned a lot in terms of the public's perception.
Whether you like it or not,
of the fishery.
Whether you like it or not, we've all been blessed to go out and catch this fish.
Things aren't bad right now.
Things are not bad.
Things are not bad. They've been bad in the past,
yes,
which is an interesting thing. If you look into the history, if you look into the first closure, if you look into the stat, you read through the miles of ICAT stuff.
Yeah.
Swordfish were in a pretty bad way in the late 90s.
That's right.
And so we've come a long way, and it's kind of one of those things where things aren't bad, and a lot of people need to understand that anyway.
Check this out real quick. This is a little piece. Tim's going to talk about the quota, what that means, what the world pie is. But check this out, and we'll come back, and then we'll talk about some more stuff here in a second. All right, here we're talking about the quota, the swordfish quota. Got to have an understanding of this. Tim, you take this, the explanation of the pie and our percentage.
Okay, swordfish is an internationally managed species there's different levels of management. We have our domestic management of our resource, and we have an international management that kind of goes above our level of things. So what the international body is called ICAT. It's got many member stations, about 20, I don't know off the top of my head, and none of these numbers are exact, but they're kind of interpolated, approximate numbers of what's going on in the international picture of things in terms of swordfish. They also manage bluefin tuna, all the big eye, albacore, skipjack, migratory species, sharks, billfish, things like that. And they get together as a scientific body and as a legislative body with all their membership countries, and they divide up and they have all their best minds thinking in doing stock assessments kind of regional wide, but it's all Atlantic stuff. They divide it into the North Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and the South Atlantic. North Atlantic meaning north of the equator, South Atlantic meaning south of the equator. And so they divide up all these pieces of pies based on the best science from the best scientists that they have in all of the membership organizations. So there's Spanish scientists, American scientists, there's Italian scientists, and they all get together and kind of pool their brains as from all of their different constituencies to break up and come up with the best management philosophy for the whole region that they're talking about. Now, being in South Florida, we're part in North America in general, and the U.S. in general. Our biggest concern and biggest areas is in what we call the North Atlantic. Okay, so this whole body decides what the total allowable catch to achieve maximum sustainable yield and everything is for that North Atlantic area. Okay, so these are 2014 numbers that I was able to drum up. You can look through and spend months reading everything on the ICAT website and going through all their stock assessments and things. It's very interesting if you're into that sort of thing. It's a lot of numbers, it's a lot of paperwork and stuff, but looking at the 2014 data, this is all 2014 by the way, the total allowable catch for North Atlantic swordfish was estimated at or set at 13,700 metric tons. Now a metric ton is 1,000 kilograms, so it's 2,200 pounds. So it's about a ton, to put it into regular perspective. From the Noaa website, our baseline U.S. quota, okay, was 2,640 tons.
Which were allowed
in
this pie.
That would be out of the whole shooting match of allowable catch to keep things sustainable and at maximum sustainable yield, which we're below right now, which below is a good thing, or above, whichever way you look at it, where everybody's under that threshold and it's fully rebuilt. Okay, so that's the maximum piece of pie that we're allowed to take out of the whole internationally managed quota.
Okay, before you go any further, just so I got you. This is the world pie of swordfish in the North Atlantic.
Correct.
There's 20 countries that make that up.
I don't know the exact number, but it's around there.
This slice of pizza, which is the U.S. right here, is 19% of the whole pie.
Yeah, this year calculated it's around that amount. So
which is this number.
Yeah, so we're a very big player in this business. You think about this and it's not divided equally amongst countries. It's based on their historical landings, their historical participation in the fishery. So Spain is a huge number. I didn't have time to sit down and calculate, but Spain is a traditionally big player in it. Portugal's another big player. Canada's a decent sized player. So you take all these countries and their historical participation rates in the fishery, and that's how they determine all of this, based on the best available science. Now when you get down to catches, if you want to get onto that, I have some records out here. The U.S. traditionally, a long time ago, more than 15 or 18 years ago, before 2000 and before a lot of the regulatory changes started to come through, we had a high participation rate in the industry, which meant a lot of boats and very few regulations, things like that. We caught a lot of our quota. And plus, it wasn't as big of a quota because the species was hurting. So they base it all upon the maximum allowable science. So in times where you have a lot of science or a lot of fish, according to the scientists, the quota becomes higher. So percentage-wise of the quota, this is looking at 2014, we caught about 30%, 30-ish%.
So this section is all you caught?
So this section is what we caught out of the allowable amount.
19%.
It was out of this 19%. What did we do that number out? It was 30%. 30%. So it was about 9% of the total swordfish caught out of the whole pie were what we caught.
So we're way under.
So way under in terms of being able to sustain the amount, and it's you can look at it a couple of different ways that we're saving more fish, so there are more fish. You can look at it as we're leaving money on the table.
Sure.
And you can look at it as there's a lot of other people that are in this that are catching their quota that would like the rest of it. So it's a difficult thing to predict from year to year with the people at ICAT. Now I don't sit on ICAT. There we have John Graves as our ICAT chair. He's a scientist from Virginia Marine Institute, and and we have recreational representatives, we have commercial representatives, et cetera. I'm not one of either of them. I sit on the domestic panel of fishermen. So, but the problem is it comes into contention is we need to try and predict how much quota and ask for it. We essentially ask for it at the international level, okay? Industries where it's very, very difficult is the bluefin tuna industry because they historically always came very, very close to their quota. Now, it's one of these things where they look at this pie as something to be utilized, okay? And so that if you're underutilizing something, then you may or may not get that piece of the pie next year. So it's because somebody else wants it. It's part of the international bargaining process. So we as a country kind of need to decide what our direction needs to be, and you kind of want to have that piece of the pie. The U.S. is in a unique situation because we're the best at managing our fisheries around. Okay, so if you have control over this part of something, you have the ability to change and to do it the way you want to do it. U.S. fisheries in general, be it recreational fisheries or commercial fisheries, are some of the highest regulated in the world. We have infinite amounts of science looking at things like circle hooks in recreational and commercial fisheries. We have all these different management tools, time area closures, all this stuff that's contributing to us being knowing what happens in our domestic fisheries the best. So our ability to control a big piece of the international pie is a huge deal, whether we catch it or not. Now, for us to keep it, we need to catch it, or we need to be making an effort to catch it, I guess, is kind of what segues into this whole conversation when we're talking about commercial fishing openings, closures, regulations, and how it pertains to everything that RJ's involved with on a recreational scale. I'm involved with on every scale. So I get to see a lot of different ends of things, but just to kind of put it into perspective for everyone,
so, yes.
this is our fishery. This is where all the fish are. Swordfish are a unique fish because they cover all over the place. We could have a fish here that was here in March that's on the Grand Banks now, or is in Portugal not tomorrow, but in a couple of months. That's why they call them highly migratory species. We're not talking about catfish in a pond, and when you drain the pond out, they're all gone. It's a very complex issue. It's hugely complex, especially down to the science of it and things. And I'm fascinated at all these meetings, the scientists that come up that are discovering new things about it. All the time.
As we talk about this, Tim, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about it. But understand that what Tim's going into, what we're talking about the whole time, the meaning, one of the issues, the reason that we're in an uproar a little bit is that this pie, okay, our portion of the pie is not being caught, and we haven't caught it in years. And these other countries are putting pressure on us. We have to come up with a solution to be able to catch more of our quota. Simply put, this is what we need to catch, and we're not catching near it. That's the whole pie. This is our piece of the pie. This are the other countries that want a piece of this pie. That's all the pie we're catching. So at the end of the day, when they go to the world meeting, I call it a world meeting, it's ICAT, and people make a decision and they sit around a round table and all these countries sit there and they want a piece of that. It's getting harder and harder for us to keep it. Correct?
Well, it's just like anything. They say, okay, well, it would be like making a business decision or something. They say, okay, well, you're not catching it. We all know that we're not catching it. Everybody internationally knows that we're not catching it. For a long time, it's been measures that have hurt we'll call it they call it productivity of the fishery. Well, you look at different things, and now, like Bobby was saying, what's helping us get there? There's been a couple of different things, that have come through recently, which are things that we can say, okay, well, we've taken a step back. We've learned how to do things the right way. We've done all these, time area closures and things like that haven't necessarily helped us catch our fish, but we found other ways of catching the fish. And we've got a better idea of where the fish are moving, where other fish are that we don't want to catch, where other animals are that we don't want to catch, which has been another big thing with the industry is, turtles and whales and things like that. So we've gotten infinitely better about all of this stuff. Now it's coming down to, okay, well, we're good at doing all of this stuff. What's going to help us catch more fish? Whether it's recreational reporting, recreational is a very small piece of the pie, but you'll look at some of the numbers that I have written down. Recreational numbers are up. I don't think it's because, there are definitely a lot more people that are doing it, but we've done a lot of outreach in trying to bringing this to recreational fishermen to get them to report their fish. And if you look at this year, it's up.
Yes.
The number of recreational fish is up. So it's a every little bit counts sort of thing, but it's being able to show this sort of outreach and different things that people are doing to try and increase our landings and keep our piece of the pie.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to sit down. But lastly, just understand something. This is something, and we can get more into it in a minute. But understand that basically what you see here, a lot of our uncaught quota has to do, there's a conservation side to that. There's the U.S. fishermen who are, releasing fish, and there's deals that are made behind the table to keep this, and some of our quota has been given to other countries, lent, that are recreationally, not, will release billfish. That's the main, turtles or whatever it might be. So they're economically sound, that we think. So understand that our uncaught quota has gone to other places. The only thing I will say, in finishing this up, Tim, because we're going to sit, is understand that with the U.S. fishery being so clean and the closures, one of the things that has happened is the United States has really, if you looked at the rest of this pie and the catch factors and the quotas being met, a lot of that is because of so much restriction on the U.S. part. So they're fishing. Other countries, the fishing has become better because of our conservation measures. So to really, in my opinion, Guy Harvey, a couple other people, when you start to really look at the organizations, one of the biggest points is we should never be penalized because this fishing is so much better because of this.
That's a trend that the whole industry feels. Every single longline fisherman in the industry feels that way. It's like, hey, I've had to do this, and this, and we'll still import this fish from here where they do nothing.
Correct.
So it's kind of, if you look at it from a U.S. commercial fisherman's standard, it's tough for them, to stand there and say, okay, well, I can't go here, and we bring in, the swordfish is one of the few seafood products in the United States that is consumed 100% here, U.S. swordfish. Plus, we consume 100% of the Canadian fish that come in several other countries. Now, it's not to say that we're the only country that's had a fleet reduction. Most of the other countries that are ICAT contributing nations, most of them, a lot of them, especially like Spain and Portugal and stuff like that, have also had fleet reductions.
I'm going to hold you on that. Fleet reduction, because you're going to talk about, you and I were talking about, let's sit. Okay, this is going to be a long one. The fleet reduction, let's go into that next here.
Okay.
But back to this, to end, just so we got it, ICAT, swordfish quota, North Atlantic stock, our piece of the pie. The rest of the pie, that's the allotment for each. A lot more to come. Okay, so there you go. There's the pie. Good job on that, by the way. So you have an understanding that our little niche in the mix of this South Florida, Central Florida area, and again, step on me and come with it if you need to say anything.
Well, let's talk about it being, it is a small piece of the pie, but it's an important piece of the pie because we all live in a very unique place. You and I have fished in the Gulf of Mexico a couple of times, okay? And we fished in, up in the Northeast and things like that. We're in a very, very unique place because of the accessibility of everything here.
Close.
It's close. It's close. It's not a 100-mile run. It's not a 120-mile run. So when we're talking about things like this exempted fishing permit, which is not a regulation, it's an exempted fishing permit. It's a short period admission of them to an area that was previously closed. Okay. So when we think about it, it's our backyard is a very fragile place. Because of the accessibility to it.
Agreed.
It's not as much of a conversation in other places because a lot of the places where the commercial fishermen can fish is a long ways away.
Correct.
And you might get 10 trips or 5 trips a year. I think that's why everybody's very, very passionate about it. So, I don't know. Do you want to talk about?
Here's what I want to talk about.
The nuts and bolts of the how this process comes to fruition?
Let's get right into it. Let's cut to the chase, and let's talk about the situation at hand. And the situation at hand is the fact that we have an opening, and we have a closed section. I'm gonna dumb it down and like we're talking.
Well, let's talk about where the closed section is.
Okay,
they're talking about
so
opening.
it's how many miles offshore?
It's north of the 28.
Okay, what does that mean?
Okay, the 28 Hillsborough Inlet is the 2615. Okay, so 1 minute of latitude is a nautical mile. Okay,
Is it off? It's north of Fort Pierce.
It's Cocoa Beach.
Cocoa Beach. So how
Yep.
far off the beach in Cocoa Beach?
It's approximately like the 100-fathom curve there. I believe.
Okay, way
Yeah.
offshore. So it's not against the beach.
No, they're not going to fish against the beach.
Correct.
It's the whole edge up there, west of or east of Cocoa Beach.
Okay, so it's a spot of water off Cocoa Beach.
It's a triangle-shaped piece. You can look at it on the
Here,
press
check
release.
this out. Take a look at this. This is the section, and I believe it's colored in green. But you can see
Yeah.
that's the section we're talking about. Now, so there's this opening. That was a closed zone.
Yes.
All this whole area has
Yep.
really been
Yep.
closed. Now, I keep seeing north of this was fishing. Where does the longline fishing start north of this?
North of this?
Yes. Is there longline fishing north of this?
North of that?
Yes.
Yeah, it's up
What-
around Jacksonville.
Around Jacksonville.
Yeah.
So that's where it really starts offshore.
And most of it's to the east,
Way out,
anyways.
way out there.
You have been previously able to fish very far to the east, okay? And outside the exclusive economic zone, which is 200 miles.
Okay, so it's way out
yeah,
there.
Yeah, so
you got this
there's-
piece of water.
Yeah, there's this piece is the triangle. There was a piece that's the other side of the triangle to a box
Yep.
that you were able to fish in, and then there's everything to the east.
Okay.
It's all in that diagram, and you can read the little one-page blurb. It's got the coordinates of all of it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so the thought process is, and understand this. So here's this piece of water, and here's the ability, these guys, we'll call them dayboat seafood, and that's fine. There's nothing that they've done wrong. If anything, they're kind of smart because they've gone after something that's available.
It was an opportunity. It's an opportunity. There's a process for it.
Okay.
There's a process for it that exists for a lot of other fisheries. There's many fisheries that only exist because of exempted fishing permits. There's shark fishery, shark research fisheries, and different in the Northeast, which is where I'm originally from. There's cod research fisheries, and but for all of this, they need to apply for an exempted fishing
Which they
permit,
did.
which there's an expiration date to.
Okay, but let's keep
Yeah.
it simple. These guys have applied for an exempted fisheries permit. Noaa has entertained it. They've taken it in. There was a comment period. There was
Yep.
meetings. We had meetings. I think we had 30 people there, but we had a meeting.
There was
Several meetings.
and there was a lot of public comment.
A lot. There was a lot.
which I was very impressed with.
Me too.
When Bob approached me and said, "What's the correct mechanism for this?" And I said, "The correct mechanism is to not spout off and
Right.
curse everybody on Facebook. The correct mechanism," and everybody did a very, very good job of this because I was reading through them last night.
Yes.
I read through them
800.
again. There was a bunch of them.
Yes.
And a bunch of them were well thought out. And everything
Letters
else.
written to Noaa.
And that's the correct way. If I've seen a way of actually making change, they do read all of them.
Mm-hmm.
They do read all of them because you can tell they read all of them because the ones that were a little bit vulgar or whatever they were sent. They had things blocked out.
Yes.
So but they do read all of them. They do take into account
Yes.
all of these comments. So it was a very, very good thing.
Okay, so these guys apply for the permit. Noaa receives it. There's a public comment time. There's a meeting. We put on a meeting. Actually, it was
It was
Arthur Mariano's
group down
yeah,
there. Yep.
Swordfish group,
Yep.
and we go down and we meet, and there's several people there. Long story short, I think there's over 800 comments, or almost 800 comments that were sent to Noaa, which was awesome. I read them as
Yep.
well. So basically, these guys.
And so the next step in terms of Noaa is they formulate what they call an environmental impact statement for anything like this, for a
Right.
fisheries closure, for a new permit, for any of that stuff. They formulate what's called an environmental impact statement, which I'd add. If you're really into this, I read it yesterday or last night. It's 190 pages or something.
Oh.
It's pretty thick. There's some neat stuff in it though. A lot of it is other stuff that I read before that they include in it. There's data on. Some of you might find it interesting. There's data on vessel prices. So what
you are a true geek, Tim. Let's move on.
The money the fishing.
go.
But so this
Okay.
environmental impact statement,
Okay.
they go through everything in terms of harming, moving it this way, harming, sea turtles, harming whales, billfish, all this stuff that people are very concerned about. They have this environmental impact statement, and it it delineates all of that, all of those concerns, and then they take all of those data or those issues and concern, combine with the public comment to make their decision.
Correct.
So they don't just take the public comment. There's not, Dayboat's application. They say, hey, public, what do you think about
think of this?
They get this whole environmental impact statement, which they obviously spent a lot of time on. It's a big deal. And then they say, this is the environmental impact statement, and we've taken into account the public comment, and here's our decision.
And that environmental impact statement is based on some science, correct?
Oh, it's a lot of science.
Correct.
They have all the records. All these boats, these aren't new boats, first of all, which is a misconception. These aren't boats from out of town. These are local, smaller coastal longline boats. Okay, these boats were previously fishing on the other side of the box. Okay, they know what they caught through the last several years, or 5-6 years, or something like that. And then this study in general, that this is with Dave Kurtstetter, was already, some of the sets were made 7 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that, with one of our local boats here. And the study was halted because I think it was more political reasons than it was scientific reasons. But they
weren't catching anything, were they, Tim?
They didn't catch much.
Okay.
Well, they caught all right, but it was political reasons
money.
why they changed it. So, anyways, so they took the beginning of that data, okay, and they took the data that's concrete that Scott's boats had the last couple of years from what they've caught, what they've offloaded, what they've discarded, and all this stuff. And so there's a chart in there that's pretty neat that'll say, okay, this area is really focusing on swordfish. They're going to catch less tunas, they're going to catch less big eyes, yellowfins and stuff. So that's a reduction in revenue. So they're looking at it, from a revenue standpoint, from, how many more swordfish do we think we're going to catch? How many less tunas do we think we're going to catch? A big hot button issue of this whole deal is bluefin tunas, which I could talk for hours about, which we're not going to do. But one of the reasons why they want to move west is seasonally to avoid the migration of bluefin tunas, because there's an individual bluefin quota now that each boat can catch X amount of bluefins a year, and you got to tie to the dock or at least quota. So the fishermen want to avoid them, but if they're forced to fish in an area where they are highly likely to encounter them versus another area, it kind of ties their hands. So it's kind of a counterpoint to that. But this environmental impact statement goes through all those different things. Okay. Ability to encounter all these different things, change of revenue, change of catch, and stuff like that. There's charts in there. You don't have to read the whole 150 pages, but you can look at it and see, Noaa's projections. And it's, monitoring's a lot different now than it was several years ago. All the boats have 24-hour cameras on them now. There's going to be observer coverage. It's going to be a very refereed deal. So,
right, which is all paid for by who?
It's all paid for by John Q. taxpayer, and Dayboat. Dayboat pays for the maintenance of their cameras, because they can't go fishing. They can't go fishing whether it's as close. Any longline boat in the United States can't go fishing without their cameras working, and can't go fishing without their VMS.
Okay, so let's take a step back. Mm-hmm. Okay, so these guys put in their thing. They put in their application.
Yep.
Their intent is to go fish this box. Mm-hmm. We want to go fish this box, and basically Noaa comes back. They look at a number of different things, science being one of them, recreational feedback, commercial feedback, whatever feedback that they get, which is so hugely important. And then they ultimately make the decision. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. So Noaa makes a decision. Mm-hmm. So in this case, Noaa made a decision. And the decision was to open it, which they'd never.
Well,
okay. Let's keep it simple.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't want to get you're.
Well, we have to say it's not a free for all.
No. Yes. Yeah. It's not a free for all.
It's
to his fleet, specific to his boats, specific to how many hooks a night on how many boats and how many sets. Specifically.
Yeah. It's a total of 720 sets of less 600 hooks or less. Mm-hmm. Yep.
How many boats total involved?
6.
6, or with 6 backups?
With 6 backups in case one of the boats has problems.
Okay, so it's 6 boats setting how many hooks?
Up to 600.
Okay, so
these boats realistically set less than that.
Okay, but
I know the boats that are in mine.
Okay, but if you're asking me, I'm going to put as many hooks out as I can. So so that's 3,600 hooks if you had 6 boats.
3,600 hooks a night.
A night. And that's every night?
No, it's up to 720 sets.
Okay, 720 sets. So a set meaning one boat has a set. That's one fishable night for one boat.
That's one fishable night for one boat.
Okay, so a lot of people are saying their math is wrong.
This is a not to exceed number. So
Okay.
it's 720 sets total, okay, between the 6 boats. So your boat might set more sets than my boat does.
Gotcha.
Because you're
Understood.
better than I am.
But you're putting a lot of hooks in the water, and we're littering the water with hooks.
Well,
but whatever, they're trying to catch fish. So the ability for them to go out and fish this zone has been approved by Noaa. Now, Tim, I want you to talk a little bit about the size of what we're talking about, because this is really where you start to understand it. When you say commercial fishing, our mind has this Taiwanese fishing vessel image of what it really is. Talk a bit about what our fishing fleet is now and what it was 20 years ago, and what direction really we're going commercially.
So in 1999, they made all swordfish, and you guys might know locally, to go buoy fishing or whatever, you have to have a limited access permit, okay? So in 1999 was when they went to limited access permits. They granted 250-ish swordfish limited access permits. Okay, some of those are hand gear permits. Most of those, I believe, the 250 permits were directed permits, directed or incidental permits, which would allow you to go long-line fishing.
Long-line.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of the scale then.
Right.
Okay, this 3 years ago, when they started with the Amendment 7 bluefin regulations, part of that was requiring 100% video monitoring, electronic monitoring between a GPS VMS that knows where they're at all the time, like an ankle bracelet on a criminal. Okay,
for sure.
You know, and
you still got yours on. Too.
Yeah. It's wearing off.
It's almost through.
It still beeps in here. I can't go to Boca. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so, you know, and they have so they have the VMS, and they're required to have video monitoring, okay, of the hauling station, so they can see where they're at, so they can identify bluefin tunas and all of that stuff. Well, so that made us realize, because you needed to be eligible for the free video monitoring, you had to have made a set in the last 2 years. So that told us how many boats were actually still fishing.
Okay.
Okay. When that happened 2 years ago, it was 100, approximately 100. Okay. It was like 107 or something like that. They did installs on. Okay. Last year, I believe the last thing, and this is off the top of my head from the meeting, I believe 70 boats made a set.
70 boats.
70 boats made a set. I would guess this year, from what I've been hearing, and boats that I know that have left the industry, and especially big boats that have left the industry, it would be closer to 60 or 65
Okay,
this
you're
year.
talking the whole,
not just the East
60
Coast. That's
yes.
the East Coast and Gulf of Mexico.
60 boats serves the whole fishery.
So from Brownsville, Texas,
yes.
to Eastport, Maine.
Okay, so basically our fleet's about this big.
In the grand scheme of things,
absolutely.
The worldwide fleets, it's shrinking. It's a good fleet, but it's shrinking and it's getting older.
It's shrinking because it's been regulated to death. Okay, and let's talk real talk. Okay, real talk. In going back years, listening to Edgar and certain guys, and when I knew nothing about this, really it was the Americans. Swordfish, we have a right to that fish. That was our right as an American for that swordfish. And when the night fishing first started, the recreational boom, the departure of the commercial fleet, we didn't really understand all that, Tim. And so one of the things that I think about now is, since those days, and you pop forward 20 years, and you think about all of the limitations put on longliners, there aren't kids growing up in longline, in the commercial business like that anymore.
Well, it's like any business. It would be like, you know, I don't know. I mean, I think of dairy farming at home. Dairy farming, you know, it's not regulated, obviously, like you know, and it's I guess that's a poor example. But you think about the amount of money that there is to be made in the first place. You know, fish against imports or something like, you know,
Correct.
cheap imports, things like that. We're on a level playing field. You know, it's imports aren't they crush the domestic market. We'll be importing, Mike Black or Scott will be importing Canadian fish here in the next couple of weeks for nothing.
Okay.
But the point the point is that's one thing. But if you were a kid and thinking of, okay, I need to invest a $500,000 in a boat, in insurance, and then get fuel and stuff for my first trip. You think about it, the biggest thing is the volatility of the business. Why would you invest in a business that you're into it to the bank for probably $750,000 by the time you're done, and you don't know if they're going to shut it down tomorrow? So there's not a lot of young people coming behind it.
Okay.
That's why I said we're in an aging fleet.
Yes, we're in an aging, not only an aging fleet, we're in a shrinking industry that's going away. The United States our government has put the longliner out of business, Cap. Basically.
It's been a death by 1,000 small cuts. You think about all the little things that have contributed to it. I have people, I ask government people all the time, I said, if I was, pretend you're a kid that comes into my shop and says, I want to go longline fishing tomorrow, where do I start? Well, you got to take a turtle release class. You got to take a marine mammal release class. You got to take those every year or every other year. Who knows? You got to take a sawfish release class. You got to take, you have to take a turtle handling class. Okay, those are the classes you have to take. Now you have to use circle hooks. You have to use weak hooks if you're in the Gulf of Mexico. So if you fish from the Atlantic to the Gulf of Mexico, you got to change all your hooks. You got to have a camera installed on your boat. You have to have a VMS. You have to have all the life-saving equipment. You have to have a boat. You have to have, spool, all the other stuff that's a given.
We should do it, Tim.
And
let's just buy a boat. We'll call it some broad.
We'll just keep going. But and then the other thing, I get customers from other countries that come in and say, hey, Tim, I want to go longline fishing on this old shrimp boat that I have. I said, hold on, Cap, let me write you up an invoice. And they walk out the door and they can go hop on the boat and go. And every single one of those fish goes on an airplane right to the United States.
Okay, so
it's a very, getting back to the subject.
Okay. You were a rant. Okay, yeah. Well, I love it, dude. I love it. But, I don't have to say anything.
But it's a very sticky. I don't want to say that there are some young people in the business. There's some young people that are in the hand gear fishery, and we're kind of diversifying in the swordfish business. Okay. And one thing is we're not up against the U.S. swordfish fleet. One of the things they had to overcome was the mercury scare, that we're all going to die from eating swordfish with mercury, and the lack of swordfish scare. So we've kind of nipped those in the bud. Also, people are eating swordfish a lot because of the recreational business. They come on vacation and go out fishing with my buddy RJ, and we catch one and we cut it up and we're like, man, I've never eaten this before in my life. A lot of people that I know that have never eaten swordfish, I've given them a piece of swordfish or something, they say, wow, this is good. They go out and buy it. So the demand for swordfish, the domestic prices are good. And it's got a potential as an industry to kind of stabilize.
Okay, it does.
Okay, maybe stabilize at this lower level, or
Okay, but I'm going to cut you off now.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'm going to say to you is that I want to show a little clip, because let's just so you understand something. This was a CNN piece done a few years back. This is, I believe, the guys from Dayboat Seafood actually in the film, the guys who applied for this and had approved. But they go in and they're talking about longline fishing not being a sustainable fishery. But these are the guys that actually promote buoy fishing, which is the new style of fishing of what you see off our coast. So buoy fishing, a relatively clean fishery, is what's going on now commercially. So you've got this fishery. There's guys down there who have invested their money in it.
Here.
Okay, yes, here. So they're here fishing, and these guys talk about that. A couple of the guys that work there or are associated with them are the guys who came up with the idea to do this, to do buoy fishing. But these are the same guys who applied for the permit to go longlining after they made this video. So check this out real quick. This is the guys.
Tim Palmer has been fishing in the Florida Straits ever since he can remember.
I was 3 years old when I caught my first fish.
And there's always been one fish that has captured his imagination more than any other.
The very first swordfish that came on the boat just captivated me. You know, that long bill, the huge eye.
Sword fishing became popular here in the late 1960s and early 70s. But by the 1990s, the swordfish were in major decline. Longline fishing, a technique where a singular fishing line, many kilometers long, equipped with as many as 1,000 hooks, was one of the main culprits in the depletion of the swordfish population.
Really, the problem with longline gear is, although in the United States we've worked really hard to make it very, very clean, it still does have a fair amount of bycatch. Things like sea turtles, the occasional marine mammal.
The Florida Straits are a nursery area for the swordfish. So many juveniles were also dying on the long lines, never giving the fish a chance to grow to adult size. In 2001, longline fishing was banned from the Straits. But Palmer, always the fisherman, found a way to make his lifelong love sustainable.
This fishing is called buoy gear fishing. The reason that this fishing gear is so sustainable is because this is actively monitored gear. We only set about 12 hooks in the water. We patrol the gear very closely. If we get a small swordfish on that's too small to keep, we get to him and get him off the hook and release him before he can die.
When we're going out, put it on the stick like this when the fish comes up.
David Kerstetter at Nova University was able to see firsthand that Palmer's method had merit.
What we found was that we had really low rates of juvenile swordfish bycatch, no sea turtles, very low interactions of any other species, as a matter of fact.
Buoy fishing has been so successful that Palmer and Kerstetter have been invited to teach it in other countries, like Turkey and Morocco.
I felt it was kind of a duty, too, to try to spread the word for more eco-friendly ways to fish. We're living in times where we've got a higher population than ever before, and the resource has to be managed very carefully.
The whole premise of the business was sustainability.
Scott Taylor of Dayboat Seafood also embraced buoy fishing, seeing it as a business opportunity. Along with Palmer's method, Taylor found a way to give the notorious longline fishing an eco-friendly upgrade.
Fundamentally, the difference between a buoy caught fish and a longline caught fish was essentially zero if both of the fish could be handled the same and both caught live. And so we started to adapt the gear, how long the gear actually soaked in the water.
And it's worked, earning Dayboat Seafood a sustainable stamp of approval by the Marine Stewardship Council.
Pretty much the Marine Stewardship Council seal is something that lets buyers know that the seafood that they're going to have for dinner is sustainable.
I think it is the way of the future. I mean, the way of life for the commercial fishermen has essentially almost become eradicated. And if it doesn't adapt and change to fit the conditions, then it wouldn't survive.
All the way from our oceans right to our plates, sustainability is saving the future of seafood. John Zarella, CNN, Miami.
All right, so that was a video put together a couple of years. It's a little backwards of what they're actually wanting to do. Interpret it the way you will. You watched it, you saw it. They put it out. We didn't put it out. But again, they've applied and they've gotten approved. Here's the part that in the discussion of people being up in arms in this area, this South Florida, Fort Lauderdale area, Boca area. This is where the buoy guys fish. This is where daytime guys fish. And I understand, Tim, that this is 300-400 miles away. But to think, here's my thing. 300 or 400, we're talking about an HMS with a tail, fish that has to swim through that area up there to get to here, and then down there, and then back through that area to get up there. Now, the water may be small, okay? And it is still a lot of hooks for a small piece of water. Okay.
Well, it's actually for that many hooks for that piece of water. That piece of water is a good-sized piece of water.
Good. So I wonder, but those fish have to swim by those hooks to get to where we're sitting.
Do you know that?
Well, they may go that way, and that's a great point. Here, you know what? Because think about this. Here's the scary part for me.
That's the point of the study.
That is
we
the
don't
point.
know that. We
But
don't know if these ones come through here.
Well, you just saw the guys wanted to put buoys in the water. Why don't you make them put buoys in the water? And make them study, do the study based on buoy fishing where they want to go do it.
You or I could go put, I have a buoy permit on my boat. I could
The
go up there
point
and do it.
here's the point. Here's one of my points now. I've listened to you, and let me make a couple of points.
Okay.
I'm looking at this from this. Here's what scares me. What you just said is so valid, because how do you know they swim through there? Well, I've satellite tagged a few fish, so I can tell you that a few have swum through there. But here's what I will tell you, and unfortunately, the nature of a swordfish is we don't really know anything about their migration. Very, very little. So here's the problem with it, and here's what you hear all the time. Man, the deep dropping's really getting bad out here, man. I think we caught all the breeders and they're gone. And then 2 years goes by and then we have an epic year. Guys, let me tell you something. Okay, if you think that fishing a sliver of water this big is impacting a swordfish on a rod, that is not the case. You're fishing on one street, our little 2-mile stretch for a little, there's no pressure on the fish. Now, the migration bed, I always said, if you want to learn something about a swordfish, tag a squid. Tag a squid. Those squid, let's just say for the next 2 years, in their migratory pattern, are 5 to 10 miles outside of our fishing area. Now we caught them all. Now we really got a problem. Hence the longliners. Well, and this is true talk. We were catching fish when the longliners were here. The fishing was good. This isn't about and the cycles.
They had 40 years of fishing.
Absolutely.
And they still had good years at the end.
The bottom line here is, well, if you on a fish market, you know that this year the fish are coming from here, this year this is better, the Keys is better, the Keys is up. The cycle of migration changes all the time.
So interesting thing.
Yes.
Allie, I just talked to Allie after.
Stop, I want to finish until I'm on something.
Yep.
I'm going to tell you now, here's what scares me. Noaa scares me because they've approved it. Okay, and we're going to go into the smoke and mirrors effect of ICAT and having to have some sort of a legitimate reason to keep our quota. That's after we're talking about this. But Noaa itself has basically, who put the longline guy out of business, okay? A lot of guys, and there was even on the table at one point for Noaa to buy it, for the government to buy licenses to put guys out of business. That's true. So my problem is you got Noaa limiting a commercial guy. Now I'm a rec guy. Here's our Noaa managing our fisheries, putting a commercial guy out of business, okay? Or putting so much pressure on him that he's got to go work at Home Depot or become an attorney. They've put the guy out. Everyone's gone. The fleet's gone from this to this. And now because they need environmental, we need a study done, they choose a couple of boats that's left out of this to give us, when they started a fishery that they've done no research on since the beginning, and the guy, the scientist in this case, was on the buoy boats since its inception, and there's been no research done by him since on buoy boats. So Noaa approved a buoy boat fishery that was clean and sustainable. These guys loved it. They promoted it. Now all of a sudden, here we are. Now let's bring a longliner back so they can go out here and set gear. Now here's my problem. Now the cycle of migration, okay? What if it's good in the 12-month period?
If it's good?
What if it's good in the 12 months that they fish? What if it's bad? Well, if they go in there and they don't catch anything, then we're all fine anyway, right? What if it's good, Tim?
I mean, don't look to me for answers.
That's my concern. My concern is that.
What if it's good? What if it's bad? What if we'll never know? That's my thing.
Well, I don't want to know.
Okay.
Leave it alone. Okay. Noaa has set up a buoy fishery that's clean. They condoned it. They gave the licenses. People are fishing. They're selling fish. Everything's fine. There's nothing wrong with our fishery. Utilize what you have to gain science. This is a joke. Noaa, okay? Noaa's responsible for this. One of the first times they've ever recanted on something they've ever done. That scares me. They're going to open it up longlining again? Really? They could have done it another way. Here's another thing that gets me. You could have utilized other resources. Ask for help with resources. I don't think that I was there. I was in the meetings in Washington. I took Mike Leach's seat on HMS. I sat there with Skip Smith and Ron Coddington and watched the whole thing. And the people really making decisions don't fish. They don't even know what you're talking about. Yet they're trying to manage something by gathering all this information, and they're going to go in their closed room now, and they're going to put it all together and go, okay, we're going to open it.
It's accounting.
Okay. Good. Accounting.
That's.
But at the end of the day. Last thing I'm going to say.
Yeah, okay.
Last thing I'm going to say on this subject. This isn't about deep dropping. This isn't about the buoy. This is about Noaa. This is about an opening to a company. It's not about the company. It's about the opening. And it's about the fact that if the cycle is good, what's coming? That scares me. And quite frankly, a lot of things are smoke and mirrors, Tim. And when I don't know what's going to happen if it's good, I already can tell you based on owning a tackle store that this year right now, guy caught 3 by 1 o'clock today, Tim. Fishing's good. Fishing's good, but yet you got the naysayer, and then you got the guy who couldn't catch his ass, catch a fish in a frickin' pond. He never catches anything anyway. The bottom line is, it doesn't matter. It's not me against the wreck, who's against the throw all that out. And the guys who don't want to help the situation, don't say anything. Because unless you have something to offer, okay, offer Noaa.
Yeah.
Because I want to work with that.
Yeah, the biggest thing, you're passionate about it. I'm passionate about it. You're in a good spot because you have one side of the fence to look at. I'm in a different spot because I cater to recreational people. I cater to commercial people, and the biggest piece of advice, we're not going to agree on everything. I'm not going to agree on everything with everybody else, okay? My biggest piece of advice is be careful what you read, okay?
Agreed.
Editorials or, editorialize things. Best thing anybody can do that's concerned about these issues is subscribe to the HMS newsletter. In the HMS email blast, they come out with, it's also good if you have a permit and they adjust landings or, regulations or whatever, more for tunas and stuff, but you get the HMS alerts in your inbox, okay, that lets you know when this comment period's coming up, which lets you know when this proposed rule's coming, or someone's applying for an exempted fishing permit for tunas or for swordfish or anything like this. Yes. It's good because you get the one, they'll do the expanded, 150-page thing, you can read it if you want, or they'll give you a little synopsis that's from the horse's mouth. It's not some diluted thing that was on a blog on Sword Fishing Central, if that even exists anymore, or whatever. But or some sort of editorial in the back of a magazine or something. You need to. The biggest thing about any of this stuff is to form your own opinions. Bob has an opinion, is very passionate about it. I'm opinionated and very passionate about it.
Can I say one more thing?
But reading up on things like this makes it so that you're not, it's not an ignorant conversation.
Here's something. Let's go back to it. Step back a second, and we have a quota issue. This whole thing is existing partially because of the pie we showed you. So because we're not catching that pie, we need to figure out how to catch more fish that we talked about. So if we need to catch more fish and they opened it and the fishing's good, that scares me thinking there's an ability to open long lining more, simply said. So that being said, what are the alternatives to be able to catch more fish? That's what we're looking for, not for me, all of us. We need to figure out how to catch more fish as a country. America, when you look at...
Well, see, one thing is a key point that we haven't really touched on. These aren't more hooks. They're the same hooks that are just put in a different place. So that's one thing that I think a lot of people aren't grasping. Mm-hmm. They're moving 600 hooks a night from here to here. They're not 600 new hooks.
Understood.
I don't have the invoice for that. I wish I could sell the 600 new hooks.
The pie is what we're concerned with, and that's why this is all happening. That's what we're thinking about. How do we catch more fish as a country? When I looked and I posted, I made that post, yes, I was upset. Do I think it's disgusting? The decision disgusts me based on that specific decision to allow that to open. I'm afraid for our future. I'm afraid for the future. Okay? Here's what I will tell you, and possibly wrapping up. You may have a lot more, but one of the things that I thought was the best that I read. Do you read the letter? It was, I forget what organization it was. Guy Harvey's a part of it. And I was going through the reading last night. And one of the things I thought, and we touched on it before, Tim. We've been so conservation-minded. Ellen Peel's, the Billfish Foundation, the Guy Harvey's, where we've protected the fish. So we've done this great justice for the rest of the world with a swordfish because we can't catch them here, but they can catch them right out there, and I understand that. So when we go to, in some fashion, help me format something so when we go to the next ICAP meeting, we're not docked for our quota, our uncaught quota, and they look at us and say, you know what, America? We love you. We love what you're doing. You're helping the rest of this fishery, and we're going to let you keep your quota.
And there are changes that are starting to trickle down to other countries, gear restrictions and things like that, which are a good thing. You know, I guess my conclusion is, you know, if you're going to eat a piece that you don't say you're the guy that can't catch anything, okay? If you're going to eat a piece,
that's me.
Eat one of our pieces. You know,
totally, absolutely.
Local fish and stuff like that. We have the ability to do it right here.
We do.
You know, and in the grand scheme of things, our fleet is not what it used to be. And to me, and I know you don't necessarily share this, our fleet doesn't scare me at the level that it's at right now.
Well, that stop right there.
Yeah.
That last part of the statement?
Yeah, the level that it's at right now.
That's the worst part of what you just said. That scares me. That based on future, based on the pie, based on all of it. That's what scares me. Understand something, and the last thing I'll say is this. I think I feel for the commercial sector. I feel for it. I've sold fish. I've been in the commercial side of it, but not a real commercial guy. Longline guys who spent their whole line, guys who have taught me how to catch more fish doing what I'm doing. The Ali Merciers, the Vince Montellas, these guys are real cats who gave us so much quality information. Skip Smith, Ron Chapman. When you look at these guys and what they did for us, you can't not have a heart for them. I'm not against the Longline guy. I'm not really against the guys who applied for the permit. I really just want Noaa to do a better job. And the management of the fishery needs to really have fishing-related people. A guy asked me a question a little while ago. He said, well, if you feel so, would you have a problem if they opened up more commercial fishermen? I would have a problem, but the problem I have is most of the people making the decisions don't really have a fishing background, and at times I'm concerned that they don't think like we do. They don't think like fishermen, Tim.
We're bringing some for a ride. No. Yesterday, the last meeting I was at, I was like, let's go. So you guys, they're talking about different gear types and stuff. I said, well, let's go for a ride. Let's go deep.
I'll tell you who was the best at it. Skip Smith, when we went, was so great with the circle hook and describing how the circle hook worked and all this stuff. And he sat at the table, and all the suits are sitting around us, and I'm watching Skip with this rubber fish and a circle hook. And it was like the amazement and the coolness of it because they got a chance to really learn something. So I think, guys, based on the future of what we're doing, whether it's the recreational community, which lastly I'll say is way bigger than commercial, down here.
Well, it's gotten there, but
the recreational community is way bigger.
It's especially here, but it's a growing thing where other things are lacking. But let me tell you, the unique situation, getting back to, we talked last night about the guy in France, Sam, the guy in France. I've been writing, chatting with him on Facebook and things. They're allowed 0 as a recreational fisherman in the south of France, in the Mediterranean. because there's been no traditional recreational fishery. We're one of the only ones in the world
Yes.
that has a recreational fishery and that has recreational contingents that fight for your recreational fishing rights. And we should feel privileged that we have such a large seat at the table.
Yeah.
We have we fight there's a lot more heated fights, like the snapper fights and things like
Yeah.
that, who gets what and everything.
Yeah.
But from a recreational standpoint, it should be a feather in everyone's cap that you have a seat here compared to other nations.
And again, skewed visions. There's a lot of people, commercial, I took a lot of flack on the commercial side yesterday for posting that, but I'm not opposed to commercial fishing at all.
No one should be.
No, I've never.
Yeah.
I feel for them. I feel for them more than anything. The guys that are left, I mean, they're still trying to make a buck and do what they're doing. I don't have a problem with that. It's the decision making, and it's how it gets to that point. I just want that to get better. And
The process is kind of it is becoming more and more convoluted. It's not as cut and dry. It's one big thing that the agency has to deal with is lawsuits. And everything's tied up in lawsuits. And you think of that environmental impact statement, it's 180 pages long. And all of these different things to even make a decision.
Yeah. And guys like you are the ones that read it.
But I feel obligated to read
Yes.
it. I mean, it's interesting to me because I'm a dork.
Yeah.
It just happens. I used to wear glasses. I
You
get
are a
zapped,
dork.
but
Yes,
it's interesting to me, and everyone should. The government's very transparent with all this stuff, and you look through it. It might not seem transparent, but it's all there.
I'm out.
But it's all there.
I'm out.
And if you're into that sort of thing, be educated. If you're passionate about it, do the reading, subscribe to the newsletter, talk to guys like RJ who've been through it, talk to guys like me. If you have any questions, give me a call. People like Vinny, even though Vinny's, seems abrasive or whatever, he's approachable with things like this.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And was in it for a long, long time,
And even the guys that I didn't go through all the post comments, but there
whatever.
was it's all good.
But don't threaten to burn people's boats down
Yeah,
and cut
we're
their
not
gear
going
up and
there.
stuff
That's
like that,
clown stuff.
and whatever. But
Right.
it's just educate yourself. It's like anything. Just educate yourself.
Anyway, we don't know how much time is left. I don't know if there's anything we can do about this, if the opening's going to happen or not, but over the next couple days, this just happened. So hopefully we brought you up to date. You got a little better understanding of the quote, the pie, how it works, and the fact that we're really not mad at anybody other than maybe Noah, for me. And you know what? I just want the decision making to be better. I thank all the people that have gone out of their way to beat, on the conservation end, the Guy Harveys of the world, the Ellen Peels of the world, the Skip Smith, the Longline guys who've given us so much. So at the end of the day, this is really about managing the fishery. And maybe we dropped the ball a little bit. Maybe we need to be better. But again, you're saying the right thing. And joining these things. Let's do what we can to protect our fishery because God's blessed us with a lot of cool things, and swordfish was one of them.
It's neat. They'll still be out there.
It is neat. Just make sure you get your ankle brace off there before we
right.
leave
Don't
here.
want to start tweeting.
You can't go to Boca.
It's Friday night.
Friday night.
Yeah.
House arrest.
Yeah.
All right.